Reynolds' family, a quiet suburban life, was shattered when Marcus, a kind-hearted father and husband, was accused of a crime so serious it sent shockwaves through their community. The evidence seemed undeniable, the whispers unforgiving, and the legal system relentless. But one person refused to believe the accusations: his brave and determined 9-year-old daughter, Maya. Maya's sharp eyes and courageous heart led her to uncover clues others overlooked. With her mother Evelyn's unwavering support, the two embarked on a harrowing journey to uncover the truth. Along the way, they unraveled a sinister web of lies, corruption, and power that reached far beyond their family, from shadowy figures with hidden motives to a system rigged against them. The Reynolds faced obstacles that would test their strength, resilience, and faith in one another. How did a young girl's determination expose secrets powerful people wanted to keep hidden? What dangers did the family face as they fought to clear Marcus's name? And most importantly, could the truth set them free before it was too late? The courtroom was thick with tension as 9-year-old Maya Reynolds took the stand. Her small frame looked even smaller against the towering wooden podium. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, as the murmurs in the audience died down. "Maya," the defense attorney began, his voice soft yet insistent, "please tell us what you saw the night Mr. Hall was attacked." Maya clutched her worn-out teddy bear, the one thing that made her feel brave. "My dad didn't do it," she said, her voice quivering but firm. "I know who did." A collective gasp rippled through the room like a wave crashing against the shore. In the back, Maya's mother, Evelyn, covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. Maya's father, Marcus Reynolds, a soft-spoken school janitor, sat at the defendant's table. His face, etched with exhaustion from months in custody, flickered with the smallest spark of hope. The prosecutor slammed his hands on the desk. "Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation from a child." Judge Whitmore raised a hand. "Let the girl speak." He turned to Maya. "Go ahead, Maya. What do you know?" She took a shaky breath. "There was a man by Mr. Hall's house that night, a man with a scar across his cheek. I've seen him before, but nobody listened to me." The room was silent. Then someone laughed low, dismissive, cutting through the tension like a blade. All eyes turned to the back of the courtroom, where Frank Mitchell, a man with a troubled past, sat with a smug grin. But something didn't add up. Maya wasn't pointing at him. "Do you recognize the person here?" the defense attorney pressed. Maya hesitated, her wide eyes scanning the crowd. Then she shook her head. "No, but I saw him. And someone else saw him too." "Who?" "A man who lives nearby. A man everyone ignores because he doesn't have a home." The crowd erupted once again. Whispers of disbelief filled the room. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists as she felt the sting of judgmental glances from neighbors she had once trusted. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court!" The defense attorney knelt slightly beside Maya. "Do you know his name?" Maya nodded. "His name is Elijah Brooks." The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Elijah Brooks was a black homeless man who often slept in the park near the Reynolds neighborhood. He was known by many, but acknowledged by few. The prosecutor chuckled, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, are we really considering the testimony of a child about a homeless man with a history of mental illness?" Judge Whitmore's face hardened. "We are considering all angles, Mr. Connolly. Mr. Grayson, the defense may proceed with their investigation." Marcus's attorney, David Grayson, exchanged a subtle nod with Maya. "Thank you, Maya." Maya stepped down and returned to her mother's arms. Evelyn hugged her tightly, whispering, "You did so well, baby." Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and bystanders whispered cruelly. Evelyn kept her head down, guiding Maya through the chaos. In the distance, a lone figure watched from the shadows: Elijah. His dark, weathered coat flapped in the wind as he shuffled toward the courthouse steps. His presence drew uneasy stares, but his eyes locked with Maya's. She recognized something in his gaze, quiet pain mixed with gratitude. Before Evelyn could stop her, Maya slipped free and ran toward Elijah. "Elijah!" The crowd hushed. Elijah knelt down slowly, his voice a soft rasp. "You remembered me, little one?" Maya nodded. "You were there that night. You saw him, didn't you?" Elijah's face tightened. He glanced at the crowd, at the reporters, and at Evelyn rushing toward them. "Yeah, I saw him. But they ain't gonna believe me." Maya reached out, taking his calloused hand. "I believe you." Tears welled in Elijah's eyes, tears of a man who hadn't felt seen in years. Evelyn reached them and pulled Maya back gently, her gaze cautious but not unkind. "Thank you," Evelyn said softly. Elijah nodded but turned to leave. "Wait," Maya called out. "Please, we need your help." Elijah hesitated, then whispered, "You be careful, kid. The truth ain't always what it seems." His words hung in the air as he disappeared into the crowd. Later that night, Evelyn tucked Maya into bed. Marcus was still locked away, awaiting the next court session. Maya stared at her ceiling, her heart full of questions. "Mom?" "Yes, baby?" Evelyn replied, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Why doesn't anyone listen to Elijah?" Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed, brushing a stray curl from Maya's forehead. "Because people judge him before they know him. He's a good man, but the world hasn't been kind to him." Maya's eyes flickered with determination. "We have to change that." Evelyn's eyes misted over. "One step at a time, sweetheart. We'll fight for the truth together." Outside, the wind howled through the trees, whispering secrets only the night could hear. Somewhere in the shadows, a man with a scar across his cheek watched from afar. And deep in the back of Maya's mind, a chilling question remained. Why would someone frame her father? And why did they choose him? The next morning, the air was thick with uncertainty. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, while Maya flipped through her diary. The events of the previous day replayed in their minds, especially Elijah's words. "The truth ain't always what it seems." A knock at the door interrupted their thoughts. Evelyn tensed but opened the door to find David Grayson, Marcus's defense attorney, standing on the porch. His coat was damp from the morning mist, and his face was solemn. "Can I come in?" he asked. Evelyn nodded, stepping aside. David sat across from Evelyn, placing his briefcase on the table. "There's something you need to know." He pulled out a thin manila folder and slid it across to her. "This is Elijah Brooks's police record." Evelyn's stomach churned as she opened it. "Why are you showing me this?" David sighed. "Because the prosecution is planning to use it against him. If Elijah testifies, they'll frame him as unreliable a man with a history of petty theft and trespassing. They're playing into every stereotype they can." Maya's face twisted with anger. "But Elijah isn't like that. He's not dangerous. He's brave." David softened his tone. "I believe you, Maya. But the jury might not." He paused. "There's something else. I did some digging. Elijah was arrested 2 years ago after a dispute with a police officer. According to the report, the officer claimed Elijah resisted when all he did was ask why he was being stopped. The charges were later dropped, but his record still haunts him." Evelyn closed the folder, her hands trembling. "They'll use everything they can to tear him down, just like they're doing to Marcus." David nodded grimly. "The system isn't built to help people like Elijah or Marcus, but there's something strange about this whole thing. Why frame Marcus at all? He's never been in trouble. He's quiet, hard-working. They picked him for a reason." Maya bit her lip. "Maybe because they thought nobody would fight for him." David's eyes met hers. "Then we'll prove them wrong." Later that afternoon, Evelyn decided to visit Elijah. Maya begged to come along, so Evelyn reluctantly agreed. They found him sitting under a pavilion at the park, staring out at the empty playground. A few joggers passed by, giving him wary glances. "Elijah," Evelyn called gently as they approached. He turned slowly, surprised to see them. "Didn't expect to see y'all again." Evelyn sat on the bench beside him. "We need your help, but we also want to help you." Elijah chuckled, low and bitter. "Help me? Lady, I've been invisible to this town since the day I was born." Maya stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the tension. "You're not invisible to me." Elijah's hardened expression softened. He sighed. "All right, kid. I'll tell you what I know." He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "That night, I was sleeping on the bench by the park. I woke up to voices, angry ones. I saw Mr. Hall argue with a man near his front porch. The man had a scar, and there was another guy nearby, watching. Tall, strong-looking, with a scar too, but on his hand." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "Another man?" Elijah nodded. "Yeah, they were working together. I saw them messing with the camera above Mr. Hall's garage, too." Maya's mind flashed back to the broken security camera the police had mentioned. "They broke it to hide what they were doing." Evelyn leaned closer. "Elijah, why didn't you go to the police?" He gave her a look of disbelief. "You serious? A black man with no home, no money, walking into a police station? They'd call me a liar before I even opened my mouth." Evelyn felt a deep pang of guilt. She couldn't argue with him. The system was stacked against people like Elijah, but she wasn't about to give up. "Then we'll make them listen," she said firmly. "You'll testify, and we'll make sure they hear you." Elijah's eyes searched her face for any sign of doubt. "You really believe they'll listen to me?" "I do," Evelyn whispered. The next day in court, the prosecution tried to dismiss Elijah's testimony as irrelevant. "Your Honor, we can't seriously rely on the word of a man with a criminal record," the prosecutor scoffed. David Grayson stood calmly. "Mr. Brooks's record has no bearing on what he witnessed. The question isn't about his past, it's about what he saw that night." Judge Whitmore nodded. "Mr. Brooks may proceed." Elijah took the stand, his hands shaking as he swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor's gaze was cold and calculated. "Mr. Brooks, isn't it true you've been arrested multiple times for trespassing?" "Yeah," Elijah admitted, "but not for lying." The courtroom murmured. David rose, his tone firm but kind. "Elijah, please tell the court what you saw that night." Elijah's voice grew steadier. "I saw two men, one with a scar on his cheek, the other with a scar on his hand. They were arguing with Mr. Hall. The next thing I knew, one of them pulled out something shiny, a gun, maybe. I heard a struggle, then they ran." "Did you recognize either man?" David asked. Elijah hesitated, then nodded. "The one with the cheek scar. That was Baldwin." A shocked murmur spread through the crowd. Baldwin sat at the back of the room, his face pale but composed. The prosecutor stood abruptly. "This is speculation." David held up a copy of the police report. "It's not speculation if the security camera was broken to hide what happened." Judge Whitmore's gavel came down. "We'll recess for the day." As people shuffled out, Baldwin shot a cold glare at Elijah. For the first time, Maya noticed something that sent chills down her spine, the faint twitch in Baldwin's right hand. A scar. Maya tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, what if Baldwin didn't just watch?" Evelyn's blood ran cold. What if Baldwin wasn't working alone, but leading the attack? The courtroom emptied slowly, but Baldwin lingered near the exit, his cold gaze locked on Elijah. His pale face betrayed only a hint of unease, but to Maya it was enough to confirm her worst fears. Baldwin was hiding something. Back in the car, Evelyn gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual as they drove home. Maya sat in the back seat, silent, her thoughts swirling. "Mom," Maya said finally, her voice soft but insistent. "Elijah didn't just see Baldwin there. He said there was another man, The one with the scar on his hand. Evelyn nodded, her eyes fixed on the road. I know, but we don't know who he is. Not yet. Maya hugged her teddy bear tighter. What if Baldwin's not just guilty? What if he's the one pulling all the strings? Evelyn's stomach twisted. She had spent countless nights trying to piece together why Marcus had been framed, but now it was starting to make a disturbing kind of sense. We need more proof, Evelyn said firmly. Elijah's testimony was a huge step, but it won't be enough. David Grayson's words echoed in her mind. The system isn't built to help people like Elijah or Marcus. The next morning, David Grayson called. I've found something, he said, his voice tense. You're not going to believe this. Evelyn held her breath. What is it? Baldwin's construction company. It had another employee who went off the radar after Mr. Hall was attacked. His name is Robert Langley. David paused. And he has a record. Assault, extortion, and… Evelyn's heart skipped. And what? David sighed. He's known for taking bribes to make people disappear. Evelyn's grip tightened on the phone. Langley, could he be the man with the scar on his hand? It's possible. But here's the kicker. Langley and Baldwin used to work side by side at the construction company before they both got fired for stealing funds. Maya had been listening from the hallway, and she stepped into the room, her eyes wide. Mom, that's why Mr. Hall was attacked. He must have known about the missing money. Evelyn nodded, the pieces slowly falling into place. And Baldwin needed someone ruthless to help him, someone like Langley. David hesitated. There's more. Langley's name showed up in Baldwin's financial records cash payments just days before the attack. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. We have to find Langley. David's voice lowered. The police are already looking. But Langley has a reputation when things get messy, he disappears. That afternoon, as Evelyn and Maya sat in the living room, the doorbell rang. Evelyn peeked through the window and saw Detective Harris standing on the porch, his expression grave. She opened the door. Detective, is everything okay? Harris stepped inside, taking off his hat. No, his voice was clipped. Langley's apartment was found empty last night. He cleared out, no sign of him anywhere. But we did find something else. Evelyn's breath caught. What did you find? Harris pulled out a small, clear evidence bag. Inside was a silver locket with a broken chain. Maya's eyes widened in recognition. That's Mr. Hall's, Maya exclaimed. Harris nodded grimly. We think so. But here's the strange part. It has your daughter's fingerprints on it. Evelyn staggered back, stunned. That's impossible. Maya's never even been to Baldwin's house. Maya stepped forward, her voice trembling. No, Mom. I touched it once. It was on Mr. Hall's porch the day after he got hurt. I thought it was his, so I picked it up. But I dropped it when you called me inside. Harris exhaled. That explains the prints, but it raises another question. Why was it found at Langley's place? Maya's thoughts raced. Because Langley took it when he ran. He must have been there after the attack. Evelyn's eyes filled with fear. If Langley was at Mr. Hall's house that night, he's more than just an accomplice. Harris nodded. We think Langley was the enforcer and Baldwin was the mastermind. That night, Maya lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day played in her mind like pieces of a puzzle that wouldn't quite fit. Why would Langley take the locket? Was it a trophy? A mistake? Or something more sinister? Then it hit her, a memory she hadn't thought about in days. She sat up quickly, heart pounding. Mom, she called, rushing into Evelyn's room. Evelyn sat up, alarmed. Maya, what's wrong? Maya held her teddy bear tightly. That day I saw Baldwin near the security camera. He wasn't alone. Evelyn's eyes widened. You saw someone else? Maya nodded. A tall man, with broad shoulders, and a scar on his hand. Her breath quickened. It was Langley. Evelyn's mind raced as she pieced together Maya's revelation. Langley was helping Baldwin from the start. Maya's eyes filled with fear. Mom, what if Baldwin didn't just frame Dad because of Mr. Hall? What if they framed him because Dad was in the way? Evelyn froze. The possibility was horrifying, but it made sense. Marcus was respected in the community, known for being trustworthy. If Marcus had found out something he wasn't supposed to— They silenced Mr. Hall, Evelyn whispered, and they tried to destroy our family. Maya's hands trembled as she asked the question that haunted them both. What if they come after us next? Evelyn pulled Maya close, her voice steady despite her terror. We won't let that happen. The next morning, Detective Harris called with an update. We found something buried behind Baldwin's old office, he said. A metal box, and it had papers inside, records of every shady deal Baldwin and Langley ever made. But the biggest one? Baldwin was paying Langley to keep quiet about the missing funds. That's why they attacked Mr. Hall. Evelyn felt a wave of relief. But it was fleeting. Is it enough to clear Marcus? Harris hesitated. It's enough to build a case, but Langley is still out there. Evelyn's heart sank. Baldwin was behind bars, but the real threat, the man with the scar, was still on the loose. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, but there was no warmth in the Reynolds home. The fear that Langley was still out there cast a shadow over everything. Evelyn hadn't slept much. Neither had Maya. Every noise outside made them jump. Marcus was still behind bars, and though the evidence was mounting against Baldwin, Langley's disappearance left a gaping hole in their fight for justice. Detective Harris had promised that the papers found in the metal box would help, but Evelyn knew one truth. As long as Langley was free, their family wasn't safe. Maya sat at the kitchen table, staring at her half-eaten cereal. She was usually the one asking questions, but today she was quiet, too quiet. Evelyn sat beside her and squeezed her shoulder. Talk to me, sweetheart. Maya's eyes flicked up. What if Langley is watching us? Her voice was small, almost a whisper. Like Mitchell was. Evelyn's heart sank. She knew what Maya was thinking. Frank Mitchell had broken into their home once. Langley could do the same. Evelyn reached for Maya's hand. We have police outside, Evelyn reassured her, and Detective Harris is tracking every lead. We won't let him hurt us. Maya nodded, but still didn't look convinced. She traced the edge of her teddy bear's paw. Mom, I keep thinking about the names in Baldwin's ledger. If we figure out who those people are, maybe we'll know where Langley is hiding. Evelyn stared at her daughter, impressed by how sharp her instincts were. You're right, Evelyn admitted. Those names could be the key. Later that day, Evelyn and Maya met with Detective Harris at the police station. Harris had spread out a series of documents on a large table. There were copies of the ledger entries, photographs of Baldwin's office, and a list of every name connected to his illegal activities. All right, Harris began, pointing to a name circled in red. Here's what we know. Baldwin was paying Langley and someone else, a former business partner named Cameron Tate. Maya leaned forward, her eyes widening. CT from the ledger? Harris nodded. Exactly. Tate disappeared around the same time Baldwin was arrested. We thought it was a coincidence, but now— He paused, his brow furrowed. It's starting to look like Tate and Langley were working together. Evelyn frowned. Do you think Tate is hiding Langley? Harris shrugged. If he's not, he might know where Langley is. We're tracking Tate's last known location, a warehouse just outside of town. Maya's stomach twisted. She remembered the scarred man's face too clearly. He wasn't someone who would go down without a fight. What happens if Langley doesn't want to be found? Maya asked. Harris's expression darkened. Then we make sure he doesn't get a choice. That evening, Harris called Evelyn again. We found Tate. Evelyn's heart raced. Where? He was at the warehouse, but he wasn't alone. Evelyn clutched the phone tighter. Is it Langley? There was a pause before Harris responded. We think so. He's barricaded himself inside. He's armed, and he's refusing to come out. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. She instinctively turned to check on Maya, who was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through her diary. "What does he want?" Evelyn asked. Harris hesitated. "He's demanding to speak to Maya." Evelyn's world tilted. "What?" "He claims he has information that can clear Marcus, but he'll only talk to her." Harris's voice was tight with concern. "Don't worry, we're not going to let that happen." Evelyn's grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles turned white. "You're telling me a violent fugitive wants to speak to my 9-year-old daughter?" "I know it sounds insane," Harris said, "but sometimes people like Langley fixate on someone they think has power. And right now, Maya is the reason this case is unraveling." Evelyn glanced at her daughter, who was staring up at her, sensing the tension. Maya's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "What's wrong, Mom?" Evelyn knelt in front of her. "Langley wants to talk to you." Maya's lips parted in shock, but after a moment she whispered, Maybe he wants to tell me the truth." Evelyn shook her head fiercely. "No, it's too dangerous." Maya held her mother's gaze. "But what if he really knows something that can save Dad?" Evelyn's heart ached at the desperation in her daughter's voice. "Maya!" Maya stood up, her small shoulders squared. "We can't let him win by staying silent." The next morning, Evelyn sat in the police command center near the warehouse where Langley was holed up. She had agreed to let Maya speak to Langley under strict conditions. She would only talk through a secure microphone. With officers surrounding the building, Maya sat in a chair, the microphone in front of her. Detective Harris crouched down beside her. "If you feel uncomfortable at any time, just say the word. We'll pull the plug." Maya nodded, though her palms were slick with sweat. She took a deep breath and leaned toward the microphone. "Hello?" Her voice cracked slightly. There was static, followed by Langley's gravelly voice. "You're brave, kid. I'll give you that." Maya swallowed hard. "What do you want?" Langley's laughter was cold. "I don't want anything, except to tell the truth." "Then tell me," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "Why did you hurt Mr. Hall? Why did you frame my dad?" There was a long pause. Then Langley's tone shifted low, bitter, almost broken. "I didn't hurt Hall. Baldwin did. He wanted Hall gone because Hall was going to expose everything: embezzlement, bribery. Baldwin couldn't afford that." Maya's heart pounded in her chest. "But you were there. You helped him." "I didn't have a choice," Langley admitted. "Baldwin made it clear if I didn't help, I'd be next." Maya's breath caught. "So, you ran." Langley's voice cracked. The oak tree behind Baldwin's old office building loomed like a silent sentinel as the officers gathered around it. The early morning fog curled at its roots, wrapping the scene in an eerie stillness. Detective Harris barked orders as officers began digging beneath the gnarled branches. Evelyn and Maya waited anxiously in the unmarked police car parked a safe distance away. Maya pressed her nose to the window, her breath fogging up the glass. Her heart thudded in her chest as the sound of shovels striking dirt echoed in the distance. "Mom, what if there's nothing there?" Maya whispered. Evelyn, sitting stiffly in the driver's seat, didn't take her eyes off the digging. "There has to be," she replied, more to herself than to Maya. After what felt like an eternity, one of the officers called out, "We've got something." Maya's eyes widened as she watched Detective Harris crouch down and pull out a rusted metal box. The hinges creaked as he pried it open, revealing a stack of weathered papers, a small leather-bound book, and a gun. The radio crackled as Harris's voice came through. "We've recovered documents, looks like ledgers, and a weapon. We'll need forensics to confirm, but this could be the murder weapon." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "The gun. That's what he used to hurt Mr. Hall, isn't it?" Evelyn nodded, unable to tear her eyes away. "It looks like it." Back at the police station, Harris spread the papers and the leather book across the table in the evidence room. Evelyn and Maya sat nearby, their nerves stretched thin. Harris ran a hand over his face. This is it. It's all here proof of Baldwin's embezzlement, payments to Langley, and even threats Baldwin made to other employees who got too close to the truth. He picked up the leather-bound book and opened it to the first page. And here's the bombshell. It's Baldwin's personal ledger. He wrote everything down. Maya leaned in, her eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. Wait, what's that name? She pointed to an entry with the initials C.T. Harris side. Cameron Tate, Baldwin's former business partner. We know he disappeared after Baldwin was arrested, but... He trailed off, his face darkening. According to this, Tate was the one who connected Baldwin to Langley. Evelyn frowned. Tate? He's still missing, isn't he? Harris nodded grimly. If he's still alive, he's either in hiding or worse. Maya's mind reeled. But why frame Dad? What does he have to do with any of this? Harris hesitated before speaking. Your dad wasn't the target at first. Mr. Hall was. But when Baldwin realized your dad was close to the Hall family and wouldn't let their secrets die, he decided Marcus was a loose end. It was easier to frame a quiet, honest man who wouldn't have the means to fight back. Evelyn clenched her fists, fury simmering beneath her grief. They picked him because they thought he'd stay silent. Maya's voice shook. But he didn't, and neither did we. 2 days later, the forensics report came back. The gun found beneath the oak tree was a match for the weapon used to shoot Mr. Hall. Baldwin's fingerprints were on it, but there was something else. Another set of prints. Langley's? Evelyn asked, as she sat across from Harris in his office. Harris shook his head. No, Cameron Tate's. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. Then Tate, he's alive. Maya sat up straighter. Do you think he's the one who sent the letter? Harris hesitated, then nodded slowly. It fits. Tate knew Baldwin better than anyone. If he felt betrayed or scared enough, he might have tried to expose him without revealing himself. Evelyn's heart pounded. So, Tate might be the missing piece. That evening, Evelyn and Maya returned home under police escort. Officers patrolled the street outside, but the house still felt too quiet, too vulnerable. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. She wandered into the living room, clutching her teddy bear, and sat on the couch. The diary she'd kept since the night her dad was arrested lay open in front of her. The pages were filled with frantic notes, but one thing caught her eye now, a detail she hadn't thought about in weeks. Mom! She called, running into the kitchen. Evelyn spun around, startled. Maya, what is it? Maya held up her diary. The night of the attack. I remember seeing a car parked down the street. It wasn't anyone from the neighborhood. It was an old black sedan, and it had a dent on the driver's side door. Evelyn frowned. Why is that important? Maya's eyes lit with realization. The dent it was on the same side as Baldwin's car, remember? But it wasn't his license plate. What if it was Tate's? Evelyn's breath caught. She grabbed her phone and called Harris. Harris, we might have something. Maya remembers seeing a black sedan that night. It could have been Tate's car. There was a pause on the other end before Harris responded. That's a good lead. I'll run the vehicle history for any sedans registered under Tate's name. Hours later, Harris called back. We found it, he said, his voice urgent. Tate's sedan. It's registered in a town 2 hours from here. We're heading out to check it now. Evelyn clutched the phone tighter. Please be careful. Maya sat beside her mom, worry etched across her face. If they find him, do you think he'll tell the truth? Evelyn wrapped an arm around her. I hope so, because we need answers. At the small motel in a rundown town, Harris and his team approached the room registered to Cameron Tate. The door was slightly ajar. Police! Harris called out, pushing the door open slowly. The room was empty except for scattered papers and a single folded note on the bed. Harris picked up the note and unfolded it. The handwriting was precise and familiar. The truth isn't always what it seems, But if you're reading this, you're close. Trust the girl. She knows more than she thinks. Harris's brow furrowed as he read the last line aloud. Trust the girl? The truth felt just out of reach. But one thing was clear. Cameron Tate was alive. And he wasn't done yet. Detective Harris stood in the empty motel room, the note still clutched in his hand. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and dust. His team searched the drawers and closets, but the room had been hastily cleared out. Whoever had been there didn't plan to stay long. Harris read the note again. Trust the girl. She knows more than she thinks. He exhaled sharply and pulled out his phone, calling Evelyn. Evelyn answered on the first ring. Did you find him? No, Harris admitted. But he left a note, and it mentions Maya. Evelyn's blood ran cold. What does it say? Harris hesitated before repeating the words aloud. Evelyn clutched the phone tighter as she glanced toward the living room, where Maya was doodling in her diary. Why would he say that? Harris's voice was steady, but cautious. I think Tate believes Maya saw something important that she doesn't even realize. Evelyn's heart pounded. We're coming down there. No, Harris said firmly. I need you to stay safe. But I think Maya's memories may be the key. Sit down with her. Ask her to go over everything she remembers about that night. Even the smallest detail could be important. Back at home, Evelyn sat on the couch next to Maya. The diary lay open between them. Maya twirled her pencil nervously. Maya, Evelyn began gently. Detective Harris found a note from Tate, and it said you know more than you think. Maya's brow furrowed. Me? But I told you everything. Evelyn reached for her hand. I believe you, sweetheart, but maybe there's something we missed. Can you tell me again everything you remember from that night? Maya took a deep breath and closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her like waves. Dad kissed me goodnight, and after I went to bed, I heard voices outside. I got up to look out my window. Evelyn nodded. Go on. There was a car, a black sedan, and I saw someone standing near Mr. Hall's porch. I thought it was Baldwin because of the scar, but now I'm not sure. Evelyn leaned in. Why? Maya opened her eyes, a flicker of doubt in them. The man was wearing a dark coat, but it didn't fit him right. It looked too big, and there was something else. Evelyn held her breath. What, Maya? Maya frowned, trying to grasp the memory. He was holding something shiny, but it wasn't a gun. It was a silver keychain. Evelyn's mind raced. A keychain? Maya nodded slowly. Yeah, it had a little silver letter on it. I think it was a T. T for Tate, Evelyn whispered, her heart pounding. That evening, Evelyn relayed the information to Harris. He listened carefully before responding. Maya might be onto something, Harris said. If it really was Tate she saw that night, he wasn't just watching, he was involved. But why leave clues now? Evelyn asked, frustrated. If he wanted to tell the truth, why not just come forward? Harris was silent for a moment before speaking. Tate could be scared, or he could be trying to control the narrative, making sure Baldwin takes the fall without implicating himself. Evelyn's shoulders sagged. So, what do we do? We find the keychain, Harris said. If it's real, it might be exactly what we need. The next morning, Harris's team returned to the area around Mr. Hall's house. They combed through the underbrush and the gravel near the driveway. After nearly an hour of searching, one of the officers called out, Found something. Harris jogged over as the officer held up a silver keychain covered in dirt. The initial T gleamed faintly in the sunlight. Harris's pulse quickened. Bag it and send it to the lab. At the police station later that afternoon, Harris waited anxiously as the forensic technician analyzed the keychain. Evelyn and Maya had come to the station, unable to sit at home any longer. The technician emerged from the lab, holding a report. The keychain has partial fingerprints. We cross-referenced them with the ones on file, and we got a match. Harris's heart pounded. Who? The technician glanced at her report. Cameron Tate. Maya's breath caught in her throat. So, it was him? Harris nodded. It proves Tate was at the scene that night. Evelyn felt a mixture of relief and dread. But where is he now? Harris set his jaw. We're close. And if Tate knows we're closing in, he might make a move. That night, Evelyn locked every door and window in the house twice over. The police cruiser parked outside gave her little comfort. Langley and Tate were both unpredictable, and she wasn't taking any chances. Maya sat curled up on the couch, her teddy bear in her lap. Her mind swirled with unanswered questions. Mom, do you think Tate sent the letter because he's trying to make things right? Evelyn sank down next to her. Maybe. But if he's scared enough to run, we have to be careful. He might not tell the whole truth. Maya hugged her teddy bear tighter. What if he's the only one who knows everything? Evelyn kissed the top of Maya's head. Then we'll find him, and we'll make sure the truth comes out. The following morning, Harris called with an update. We tracked down Tate's last phone call. He contacted someone in the city, a lawyer. I've scheduled an interview with the attorney. If Tate's trying to cut a deal, this is our chance. Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. Do you think he'll show? Harris's voice was cautious but determined. He might not have a choice anymore. The walls are closing in. Maya watched her mother hang up the phone, her eyes filled with quiet determination. The truth isn't always what it seems, Maya murmured. But we're getting closer. Evelyn nodded, pulling her daughter close. Closer than ever. The sun hung low in the sky as Evelyn and Maya pulled into the city. The police station where Detective Harris had scheduled the meeting with Cameron Tate's lawyer sat like a gray monolith among bustling streets. Maya shifted nervously in her seat, clutching her teddy bear tightly. You don't have to come in, Evelyn said gently, brushing a stray curl from Maya's face. I can wait out here with you. Maya shook her head. No, Mom. I want to know what he's trying to say. If he's the reason Dad's in jail, I need to hear it. Evelyn admired her daughter's bravery, but it didn't ease the knot of worry in her chest. They walked into the station, where Detective Harris was waiting by the door, flanked by two uniformed officers. His face was unreadable, but his eyes sharpened when he saw them approach. Tate's lawyer is here, Harris said as he led them into a private interview room. But no sign of Tate himself. This could be a stall tactic or something else entirely. Evelyn frowned. If he's using a lawyer to speak for him, maybe he's afraid. Or buying time, Harris muttered. Inside the room, a middle-aged man in a dark suit sat at the table, briefcase in hand. He stood as they entered, offering a polite but distant smile. I'm Robert Stanley, the man introduced himself, his voice clipped. I'm representing Cameron Tate. Harris leaned forward, his tone direct. Where is Tate? Stanley's face didn't waver. Mr. Tate is willing to cooperate, but on his terms. He's afraid for his life. Afraid of Baldwin? Evelyn asked. Stanley's lips pressed into a thin line. Afraid of whoever is left. There are still people connected to Baldwin's network who don't want the truth to come out. They're ruthless, and Mr. Tate knows too much. Maya leaned in, her small voice cutting through the tension. Why did Tate send the letter? Why me? Stanley hesitated, then opened his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. Tate wanted you to have this. Evelyn reached for it cautiously and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper with Tate's handwriting. Maya, I sent the letter because you're the only one they couldn't silence. Baldwin framed your father to protect himself, but I saw everything. There was more than one reason Hall had to be silenced. He wasn't just a whistleblower. He had proof Baldwin was paying off the police. Langley was the enforcer, but Baldwin had help. That's why you need to stay safe. Not everyone in the system can be trusted. Evelyn felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. A police cover-up? Harris's face darkened. That would explain how Baldwin stayed ahead of us for so long. Maya's voice trembled. But if someone in the police helped Baldwin, they knew Dad was innocent. Harris nodded grimly. And they let him take the fall. The station was buzzing with activity when Harris stepped into the hallway to make a call. He barked orders into the phone, his tone sharp and precise. Evelyn and Maya remained seated in the room, the weight of the note pressing down on them. "Mom, what if they try to hurt Tate?" Maya whispered. Evelyn pulled her daughter close. "We won't let that happen." Moments later, Harris returned. "We've tracked Tate's phone again. It pinged near an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. If he's hiding, that's where he'll be." "I'm coming," Evelyn said without hesitation. Harris shook his head. "It's too dangerous. I'll take a team." "No." Evelyn's voice was firm, but her eyes were pleading. "He sent the letter to Maya. He's scared. He'll run if he doesn't see a familiar face." Harris exhaled sharply but nodded. "All right, but you follow my lead." The drive to the warehouse was tense. The sun had set, and the dim streetlights cast long shadows over cracked pavement. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows shattered and walls scarred with graffiti. The sound of dripping water echoed in the still air. Harris signaled for his officers to fan out. He, Evelyn, and Maya stayed behind as two officers approached the front entrance. The door creaked open. One officer called out, "Mr. Tate, it's the police, we're here to help." Silence. Then a muffled sound from inside. Harris motioned for Evelyn and Maya to stay put before stepping inside with his weapon drawn. Seconds felt like hours. Maya clenched her fists, trying to be brave, but fear bubbled in her chest. Finally, Harris's voice rang out. "It's him! He's here!" Maya and Evelyn rushed forward as Harris reappeared, helping a disheveled Cameron Tate out of the shadows. The revelation of Detective Ryan Cole's betrayal sent shockwaves through the room. Detective Harris's jaw tightened as he absorbed the weight of what Cameron Tate had just confessed. "Cole?" Harris muttered, pacing the room. He was on the task force for Hall's case from the beginning. That's how Baldwin stayed ahead. He had someone feeding him everything. Evelyn's face paled. "So, the whole time we were fighting to prove Marcus's innocence, someone on the inside was making sure the truth never came out?" Maya sat quietly, hugging her teddy bear as the words sank in. "He knew Dad didn't do it, and he let them lock him up anyway." Her voice was low, trembling with both fear and anger. Harris turned to Tate. "We need more. What did Cole do, exactly? Was he directly involved in the attack?" Tate swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he held the cup of water Harris had given him. "I don't know if he was there that night, but I do know this: he helped cover it up. When Baldwin called in favors to frame Marcus, Cole made sure the evidence stuck." Harris exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. "This goes deeper than I thought." Evelyn leaned forward, her voice sharp. "So what do we do now? Cole is still out there, and if he knows we've figured this out—" She trailed off, her stomach twisting. "He'll do whatever it takes to protect himself," Harris finished grimly. "But if we move too quickly without enough proof, he'll slip through the cracks." He looked at Tate. "Is there anything else? Anything that connects Cole to Baldwin directly?" Tate hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There's a ledger, a separate one. Baldwin didn't trust anyone completely, not even Cole. He documented every payment, every favor. I helped him hide it, but I know where it is." Harris's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Tate glanced up, fear in his eyes. "In Cole's cabin. It's in the woods near Lake Briar." Evelyn's breath caught. "That's miles from here, and isolated." "Exactly," Harris said, already grabbing his phone. "We need a warrant and backup. If Cole's hiding something there, we're going to find it." As the team prepared for the operation, the tension in the air thickened. Evelyn paced nervously near the station's entrance, while Maya sat quietly, clutching her teddy bear. "Mom," Maya whispered, "do you think Cole will run if he finds out?" Evelyn knelt down beside her. "He might, but Detective Harris won't let that happen." Maya nodded, but her wide eyes betrayed her worry. I don't want him to hurt anyone else." Evelyn hugged her tightly. "He won't, sweetheart. Not this time." The drive to Lake Briar was tense and quiet. Harris led the convoy of police cars as the dense forest closed in around the narrow road. The trees loomed tall and shadowed, their bare branches twisting like claws in the fading afternoon light. The cabin came into view, a small, weathered structure with a sagging roof and boarded windows. A faint wisp of smoke curled from the chimney. "He's here," Harris muttered, parking the car. He signaled to his team, and they fanned out silently, surrounding the cabin. Harris motioned for Evelyn and Maya to stay behind. "Wait here," he said firmly. "We'll handle this." Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the officers approach. She clutched her mom's hand, holding her breath. A loud knock broke the stillness. "Detective Cole!" Harris shouted. "This is the police. We have a warrant." For a moment there was silence. Then a gunshot rang out, shattering the quiet. "Get down!" Harris yelled, diving behind a tree as the officers scrambled for cover. Maya screamed and buried her face in Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her daughter, shielding her. Another shot rang out, this one tearing through the front door. Harris's voice crackled through the radio. "Hold your fire. We need him alive." The standoff felt like an eternity. Then, the cabin door creaked open slowly. A man stepped out, his hands raised but not in surrender. Cole's face was twisted with rage and fear. "You don't know what you're doing," Cole shouted, his eyes wild. "This isn't just about me." "Drop the weapon, Cole," Harris commanded, his gun trained on him. Cole's gaze darted toward the tree line, his jaw clenched. "They'll come after you, too. You think you've won, but Baldwin wasn't working alone." Harris took a cautious step forward. "We already know, Cole. It's over. You've lost." Cole hesitated, his fingers tightening around the rifle in his hands. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But as the tension reached its peak, a shot echoed from behind Cole, not from the officers, but from the cabin. Cole's body jerked as he crumpled to the ground. Harris's team rushed forward, securing the scene. Harris kicked Cole's rifle away and crouched over him. "He's alive!" Evelyn and Maya watched in shock as the officers dragged a second man from the cabin, Langley. His face was pale, his eyes darting in every direction. "Langley," Evelyn whispered. Harris hauled Langley to his feet. "You've got a lot to answer for." Langley sneered. "So, do your friends." At the station later that night, Cole was stabilized and placed in custody. Langley, bruised and defiant, sat across from Harris in the interrogation room. Evelyn and Maya watched from behind the glass. "You made one mistake," Harris said, his voice low. "You thought no one would fight back." Langley's grin faltered. Maya pressed her hand against the glass, her heart steady now. "We're going to bring Dad home," she whispered. The dim interrogation room was filled with a suffocating tension. Langley sat slouched in the chair, his wrists cuffed to the table. His smug demeanor was cracking, his eyes darting nervously around the room as Detective Harris stared him down. "You're cornered, Langley," Harris said, his voice calm but firm. "Cole is in custody. Baldwin is in prison. And Tate? He's talking." Harris leaned in closer. "You're the last piece of this puzzle. Cooperate, and maybe you'll walk out of this alive." Langley's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you?" He leaned back, the cuffs clinking against the table. "But there's one thing you don't understand." "What's that?" Harris asked, his tone sharp. Langley's grin faded, replaced by something darker. "Baldwin wasn't the one calling all the shots. Sure, he was the face of the operation, but the real power, the ones who made sure the system looked the other way, they're still out there." Evelyn and Maya stood behind the glass, watching every movement, every word. Evelyn's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her knuckles white. "What is he talking about?" Evelyn whispered. Maya clutched her teddy bear tightly. "Mom, what if he means someone bigger? Someone we haven't found yet?" Inside the room, Harris pressed on. "Names, Langley. Who else is involved?" Langley chuckled dryly. "You really think they'd let me keep that kind of information? I'm just the guy they called when things got messy." He leaned forward, his grin returning. "But you already know that, don't you? Cole was just like me, a cog in the machine." Harris slammed his hand on the table, his patience wearing thin. "If you don't give me something solid, Langley, I'll make sure you rot in a cell for the rest of your life." Langley's smirk faltered, and he sighed. "Fine, I'll give you one name." He hesitated, his voice lowering to a whisper. "Ever heard of Richard Callaway?" Harris's expression darkened. Callaway was a wealthy businessman with deep ties to local politics. His name had surfaced in past investigations, but nothing ever stuck. Callaway was untouchable, or so it seemed. "Callaway funded Baldwin's construction company," Langley continued. "When Baldwin got sloppy, Callaway paid to cover it up. The cops, the courts, even me." Harris narrowed his eyes. "And why should I believe you?" Langley smirked again. "You don't have to. Just check the ledgers. Callaway's name is all over them. He's the one you really want." Later that evening, Harris gathered his team in a briefing room. Evelyn and Maya sat in the corner, listening as he reviewed the evidence they had against Callaway. "If Langley's telling the truth, Callaway is the puppet master behind everything," Harris said. "Baldwin was running the day-to-day, but Callaway was the money and the influence." "What about the ledgers?" Evelyn asked. Harris nodded. "We found Callaway's initials in the financial records. He funneled money through Baldwin's company and used Cole to clean up any loose ends." "So, what's next?" Evelyn pressed. Harris's jaw tightened. "We build a case, but it's not going to be easy. Callaway has powerful friends, and he's covered his tracks for years." Maya spoke up, her voice small but firm. "We can do it. We've come this far." Harris met her gaze and gave a small smile. "You're right, Maya. We've come too far to stop now." The next morning, Harris obtained a search warrant for Callaway's offices. His team stormed the sleek corporate building, combing through files and seizing computers. Evelyn and Maya watched the news coverage from their living room, their hearts pounding as reporters swarmed the scene. "Do you think they'll find what they need?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn wrapped an arm around her. "I hope so, sweetheart, for your dad's sake." That afternoon, Harris called with an update. "We've got him," he said, his voice triumphant. "Callaway's emails confirm everything: his connection to Baldwin, the payments to Cole, and even the orders to frame Marcus." Evelyn felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by a lingering unease. "What happens now?" "We're issuing an arrest warrant," Harris said. "This time, Callaway won't be able to buy his way out." As the sun set, Evelyn and Maya sat at the dinner table, the weight of the day's events pressing down on them. "Mom," Maya said softly, breaking the silence, "what if there are more people like Callaway? People who think they can just hurt others and get away with it?" Evelyn reached across the table, taking Maya's hand. "Then we keep fighting, Maya, just like we've done for your dad." Maya nodded, her eyes burning with quiet determination. The following day, Callaway was arrested in a stunning raid on his mansion. The news spread like wildfire, and the town buzzed with shock and speculation. Reporters lined the courthouse steps as Callaway, flanked by his high-powered lawyers, was led inside in handcuffs. Inside the courtroom, Evelyn and Maya sat with Harris, watching as the prosecutor presented the mountain of evidence against Callaway. Emails, bank records, and Langley's testimony painted a damning picture of a man who had built his empire on corruption and manipulation. As Callaway's cold gaze swept the room, his eyes locked briefly on Maya. A flicker of recognition crossed his face before he turned away. Maya leaned closer to her mom. "He looked at me," she whispered. Evelyn placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "It's because he knows he can't win." By the end of the hearing, Callaway was denied bail. As he was escorted from the courtroom, Evelyn felt a sense of justice finally within reach. Maya looked up at her mom. "Do you think Dad will come home soon?" Evelyn smiled through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, I think it's only a matter of time." But deep down, she knew the fight wasn't over yet. Callaway's conviction was only one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that had tested their family's strength and resilience at every turn. 2 weeks after Richard Callaway's arrest, the courtroom was packed once again. The air buzzed with anticipation as the final pieces of evidence were presented, tying Callaway's crimes directly to the frame job against Marcus Reynolds. Emails revealed Callaway had ordered Cole to plant evidence, while Baldwin carried out his orders to silence Hall and destroy anyone who got in the way. For Evelyn and Maya, the hours crawled as they waited for the moment they'd dreamed of: Marcus's name being cleared. The judge's gavel brought the room to silence. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds the charges against Marcus Reynolds to be baseless and malicious. "All charges are hereby dropped," Evelyn gasped, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Maya tightly. Across the room, Marcus sat in stunned disbelief before breaking into a wide smile. "Daddy!" Maya cried, running to him as he stood. Marcus knelt and wrapped her in his arms, his own tears falling freely. "My brave girl," he whispered. "You never gave up on me." Evelyn joined them, pulling both of them into a tight embrace. "We're finally free," she whispered. The courtroom erupted in applause as Detective Harris approached the family. "It's official," he said, a rare smile softening his usual serious expression. "Marcus, you're going home." The sun was setting as the Reynolds family walked out of the courthouse, the warm golden light casting long shadows on the pavement. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but Evelyn held up a hand, silencing them. "We have no comment today," she said firmly. "This is a private moment for our family." Hand in hand, they made their way to the car. The drive home was quiet, filled with unspoken gratitude for the long, hard battle they had endured. As they pulled into the driveway, Marcus let out a shaky breath. "I didn't think I'd ever see this house again." Evelyn touched his arm. "You're home now. That's all that matters." Inside, the small house felt warmer than it had in months. The walls that had once seemed oppressive now felt like a sanctuary. "Dad," Maya said suddenly, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the kitchen. "I have to show you something." Marcus laughed, letting her drag him. On the fridge was a drawing Maya had made, their family, standing together under a bright sun, holding hands. Marcus blinked back tears as he looked at the picture. This kept me going." Maya smiled, hugging him tightly. "I knew you'd come home." The days that followed were a mix of joy and adjustment. Marcus spent hours catching up on lost time with Maya, listening to her stories and marveling at how much she had grown. He baked bread with her, something he had learned during his time in jail, and they laughed as flour covered the kitchen. Evelyn watched them from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride. Their family had been tested in ways she never thought possible, but they had come out stronger. But the scars lingered. Marcus struggled with nightmares, flashes of his time behind bars, and the feeling of being powerless. Evelyn encouraged him to talk about it, and slowly he began to open up. "Some days, it felt like I'd never get out," he admitted one night as they sat on the porch together. "But knowing you and Maya were fighting for me, that's what kept me going." Evelyn placed her hand over his. "We're here now, and we'll face whatever comes next together." The Brave Voices Foundation gained momentum in the weeks following Marcus's exoneration. Evelyn and Marcus worked tirelessly to help other families caught in similar battles, offering them resources and support to navigate a flawed justice system. One afternoon, as Evelyn finished a meeting, Maya ran up to her, clutching a flyer. "Mom, can we hang this up at the community center?" Evelyn looked at the flyer and smiled. It was an announcement for the Foundation's first official event, a panel discussion about wrongful convictions and systemic injustice. "Of course, sweetheart," Evelyn said, hugging her. "This is how we make a difference." On the day of the event, the community center was filled with people from all walks of life. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, Marcus and Maya by her side. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady. "My name is Evelyn Reynolds, and my family has experienced firsthand what it means to fight for justice in a system that isn't always fair." She glanced at Marcus, who nodded, his own voice firm as he spoke. "I lost months of my life because of lies, corruption, and people in power who thought they were untouchable. But I'm standing here today because my wife and daughter refused to give up on me." Maya stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the room. "Even if you're scared, you have to tell the truth. Sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest difference." The crowd erupted in applause, and Evelyn felt a wave of pride as she looked at her family. Later that night, back at home, they sat together on the couch, watching a movie and eating popcorn. The weight that had hung over them for so long had finally lifted, leaving only the quiet comfort of being together. As the credits rolled, Maya leaned against Marcus. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Are we going to be okay now?" Marcus kissed the top of her head. "We already are." And as the laughter and love filled their small home, the Reynolds family knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges came their way, they would face them together, stronger than ever. As the Reynolds family's story comes to an end, we're reminded of the power of courage, resilience, and standing up for what's right. No matter how difficult the fight, truth and justice can prevail when we refuse to give up. If this story inspired you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that highlight the strength of the human spirit. Together, we can shine a light on the power of hope and perseverance. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.